The International Association for Near-Death Studies presents NDE Radio, a weekly exploration of near-death experiences and similar encounters with the other side. Now, here's your host, Lee Witting.
Welcome to NDE Radio, brought to you by IANDS, the International Association for Near-Death Studies. I'm your host, Lee Witting. Our return guest today, James Bean, was last on NDE Radio some 2 years ago on the show of May 8th, 2017. James is a comparative religion scholar and a book reviewer, author, public speaker, broadcaster, and podcaster with a broad familiarity with global religions and spiritual traditions. He's been involved with Public Radio, Radio for Peace International, the Community Radio Project, and Wisdom Radio, where he was on for about a decade on Sirius satellite radio. And these days, James is an independent producer currently creating programs for several stations. James, welcome back to NDE Radio.
It's great to be back. It's been a while. It's nice to be back on.
2 years is too long. I was surprised that it had been this long. James, you recently did really an amazing show for Spiritually Awakening Radio entitled Multiverses, Dimensions, and Near-Death Experiences. And in it, you described early mystical revelations that there are many, if not countless, worlds out there besides our Earth. And now that we seem to be in the process of destroying the Earth, these worlds may represent other places we humans will wind up going to reincarnate when the Earth option's no longer available. But let's look into some of the past things that you referred to on that show, the mystics and the scientists and their poetic and insightful visions of the creation of the multiplicity of the universe, if you will.
Yeah, there have been some through the intuitive path, the revelatory path, even before the age of science. There were a few people way ahead of their time that talked about other worlds and dimensions. Giordano Bruno, of course, who lived from 1548 to 1600 or so, talked about there being countless suns and countless Earths rotating around their suns in the same way that the Earth rotates around our star, and that there are beings on some of those worlds. There are other Earths out there. He was saying that, and he was actually a Christian hermeticist, kind of metaphysical, Gnostic, Catholic person from the Middle Ages. And then, of course, further to the east, I think I'll just read this poem from Giordano Bruno that kind of sums up his message. Thus is the excellence of God magnified, and the greatness of his kingdom made manifest. He is glorified not in one, but in countless suns, not in a single earth, a single world, but in 1,000,000, I say, an infinity of worlds.
Wow.
The poetry version of his teachings.
Now, is this the reason the Catholics put him to death?
I believe it is. There has been some debate about that, because of the office of the Inquisition, or whatever the specific name of it. They kept their edicts secret. But actually, I heard a program recently. It was a SETI Institute-sponsored program saying that, indeed, they took a look at some of the actual paperwork there of the kangaroo court, the inquisitors handing out death sentences for people with slightly different theological belief systems, weirdly enough. And yes, that other Earths, for them, presented the problem of there being other Christs to be, on those other Earths, and they just had they couldn't really wrap their minds around the concept of other Earths out there. And so, of course, the thing to do is to kill the messenger.
Which they did by burning him at the stake, as I recall.
Burning him at the stake. That's how we treat our philosophers in the West. And further to the east, Guru Nanak at about the same time was saying things like, countless are the Earths, millions are the skies and solar systems, many millions are the moons and suns and stars. many times has the universal expanse occurred. That's from the Sikh scriptures of India at about the same time. But he didn't get burned at the stake, though. They make icons of him and celebrate his birthday and day of death, and he's highly respected in India.
Well, Christianity seems to have a starting point and a proposed end time, and these other religions often are more circular. They see cycles going back to the beginning and starting over again, and that would probably leave room for more worlds to come into existence.
Yeah. Eastern religions in general believe in multiple heavens, generally reincarnation, and that there are other dimensions as well, and beings and things going on. So they don't really have a problem with any of that. Now, there have been forms of Christianity that believe that as well. They're just not as popular in the Western world, or got wiped out in the Middle Ages or earlier still. But yeah, I've seen a few passages. In light of science, I think probably even Orthodox Christianity will notice a few passages from its own scriptures that talk about God creating worlds, plural, and probably will adjust to the reality of whatever science will discover about exoplanets with life in the future, and probably will eventually get to that same point of view.
Well, I think some people who've had near-death experiences have had visions of other worlds and the possibility of our reincarnating on other planets and other forms. That's not the most common story that comes back with an NDE, but it's certainly, there are some of them like that. Right,
yeah. Near-death experiences parallels the mystic journey. It's just a more drastic way of getting out of your body, of course. Having a near-death experience gets you there all at once in a hurry. Whereas the mystics take time to meditate and kind of gradually explore those inner worlds, other worlds. But they're very similar. They parallel each other quite nicely. I've always enjoyed reading about various near-death accounts. Pam Reynolds, especially her NDE, and kind of notice the parallels between her experience and what other people try to do through meditation.
Yeah, and meditation is a good alternative for sure to actually dying in an accident or as a result of a heart attack or something like that.
Right, and get to benefit. The masses can potentially benefit from that same insight. The astronauts talk about the overview effect. When you get into Earth orbit and look down on the Earth, and at last you see, hey, that's the planet that we all live on. And it becomes more real, and so too in through spiritual experience we gain new insight into life and living, and so it's a valuable thing. However you get there, it does change one to have some sense that there's more than just the world of the five senses of the physical realm.
I was trying to remember last night, and I couldn't come up with any examples of people who practice astral projection, who consciously reach a point where they can leave their bodies attached by a silver cord and go to other places, whether some of those other places include entirely different worlds or not. Have you encountered any stories like that?
Yeah, online there's some groups over the years of people that experiment. In the West, typically they're not part of a spiritual path, an organized thing, and they're just getting some hem-sync tape or CD or, and experimenting on their own. And they can have good experiences. They might have negative experiences, too. A cold breeze blows through the room and an encounter with a negative entity of some sort. So with the mystical tradition, of Kabbalah or Sant-Mat Sufism, Orthodox mysticism, you get some instructions and in order to stay out of the bad astral neighborhood, so to speak. But I think it's possible for most anyone to have that sort of sense of other dimensions, or, can begin their own journey into the kingdom of the heavens, if they're just able to transcend the monkey mind, the thoughts, all those things when you first encounter sitting down, trying to meditate for the first time. If you can kind of get past that struggle phase and then just sit and enjoy, relax, then you can get to those inner levels.
One of the things that always struck me, I had a friend years ago who had a grand mal seizure, and she said when she came out of it that when her brain was totally zapped by whatever electrical current was going or not going through it, she said, for a moment I had the answer to every question I'd ever wondered about or ever asked. And it's shutting down the brain, really, is the goal of meditation too, in a way. It's the brain seems to be the obstacle that turns everything into a 3D interpretation of what's much vaster and more important to our way of thinking. Right.
Be still and know that I am God. Psalm 46:10, the idea of dying to self temporarily. St. Paul said, I die daily. And in the East, there are people that in their poetry, they talk about death before dying through their spiritual practice. And just to find the off button, on the mind, the ego, the physical world, the five senses, just to shut things off and explore that inner space or the spirit and see what that's like, and, notice that neglected part of ourselves and spend a little bit of time there. And so it's something that people aren't accustomed to. Everything has to be thoughts or deeds and not just being. So it's good to just be able to be in that spiritual state for a while, and that's just another name for meditation or contemplation.
Mm-hmm. One of the quotes you sent me was this Yeshua Greek Gospel of Thomas. Recognize what is before you, and what is hidden from you will be revealed to you. For there's nothing hidden that will not be revealed, nor anything buried which will not be raised. Which, in a way, implies, you can take it from a meditational point of view, but you can also take it from an interaction with what is standing in front of you. The consciousness that is the world.
Yeah, there's a lot that is in front of us that we don't see, and that is an interesting thing that the human race is very good at, not seeing, not seeing the obvious on many levels.
It's almost like Plato's cave, where we're looking, but all we're seeing are the shadows of the things that really exist.
Yes, or seeing through a glass darkly.
Right.
We're not fully aware of the full spectrum, or not even fully aware of other human beings and what's going on in the world, much less in the heavens. But we can, if we can just kind of break out of our normal process, walk through the woods, meditation, read a book, sit and ponder. If we can find some escape route to get out of our normal routine and see things from a different angle of vision, how therapeutic that is.
Yeah, one of the recommendations, and I'm not recommending it, but one of the things that, for instance, LSD does is it opens your eyes to a new way of seeing what has become habitual and ordinary to you in your ordinary life. Suddenly you feel like the sunset of sunsets, or the leaf on the tree that is the leaf of all leaves, the penultimate leaf, because suddenly you're seeing what's always there in front of you, but you're seeing it with new eyes.
That's what they say. Yes, there are some eloquent descriptions along those lines.
Ram Dass,
right?
was a big promoter of that.
Right. At one time, and then he went into Eastern religions, and so for him it was a transition to meditation, but he had to break out of his conventional thinking first, and that's the route he took.
Well, it does open your eyes. I can recall from 40 years ago learning things by that route, but no more. Anyway,
meditation is a chemical-free way to get there.
One of the former members of the board at IANDS, though, was a psychologist who made several trips down to the Central America to meet a shaman and partake of ayahuasca, which is, another hallucinogen. And his experience with it was that there were beings on the other side. One story that I'd heard from an ayahuasca experience was that the fellow took this chemical and he saw these serpent-like beings that told him that they were the actual creators of the universe and they were the source of everything. And he came back when he woke up and he told his shaman about that. The shaman said, "Oh yeah, they always say that." So wow. you can be distracted and misled even going through an experience like that, or maybe especially by going through an experience like that.
Yeah, I've heard that before about ayahuasca. Weird things going on the ayahuasca channel. Yeah, I've heard that. That's kind of the astral plane. Sounds like you need a vacation from your vacation after that.
Yes. Well, tell us about some of the other early insights that you sent me some amazing poetry. This Guru Granth. Is it
right? The Sikh scriptures of India. And yeah, as the bubbles in the water well up and disappear again, so the universe is created, says Nanak. The whole idea of bubble universes that was around before M theory and quantum physics and all the science.
Yeah, I mean that's a amazing insight, because it's on the cutting edge of physics that they're talking about something like that. And here's someone who either saw it in a vision, or who knows, maybe figured it out from an earlier. I don't know how you explain that kind of leap forward. It's almost like Da Vinci designing helicopters or something along those lines.
Yeah, sometimes folks will take that giant leap forward through insight, intuition, meditation, getting a vision, and yes, the idea that the Earth rotates around the sun instead of the sun rotating around the Earth, Copernicus.
Right.
Yep, there's something to be said for, the Sikh scriptures in particular were advocating, that there's other Earths, and that's all in writing from a few centuries ago. And there's a Sikh Wikipedia page. They have their own Wikipedia, and they were saying, hey, they're ignoring us. This is pretty amazing. In our scriptures that we talk about other Earths, and no one's noticing us. Hey, scientists, notice this.
And it was this Sufi that said, only the one who knows the mystic art of dying while living knows the real secret. Should you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, death before dying, or dying to live, or die so you won't have to die again. There are different verses of poetry in the East that speak of death before dying, and through spiritual practice.
Now this takes a different turn, at least this is more like a Christian idea that and I'll read some of the lines that you sent me from this. Begone, foul world, beguile me no more. I'm already in anguish about my stay here. I mean, this sounds so Christian. I'm a wayfarer. My home is far away, in heavens. And you have enticed me with false promises. Only if you forsake the world and die while living can you find the Lord. Oh, Bahu. But it could be, oh, Jesus.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And that's, I think that's, as much as I admire the Sufis, I think that's not giving the earth enough credit for what it can provide for us.
Well, these same folks, quite often in the mystic tradition, that speak of the earth as an illusion, it's a kind of Eastern Religion 101 about the earth being illusion, or the physical realm being illusion. But at the same time, they have a lot of ethical standards and teach compassion. And so, and this is true of Buddhism as well. And so it may be illusion or temporary. We're just renters. We're not owners here. We're just temporarily just in this world or passing through. But their message really typically is not to treat the world as a trash can or to not care, but to care very much and make it into a sacred experience. And so it's an illusion, but we have our corner of the universe. We have our sphere of influence and should use it wisely and make it into something positive.
I also thought while we were contemplating this program about the Matrix movies and how the Matrix theme that the reality that most people were living in was just an illusion came about because they had already destroyed the earth. And so when the machines took over, they just generated an artificial, a virtual world for people to live in, because we'd done all that damage already. And in a way, we may be going in that direction now. I mean, kids don't go out and play in the woods anymore. They sit down with their computers or their phones and work in virtual worlds with virtual characters, and they're just not out there anymore. I mean, you and I live in Maine and we're surrounded by nature, but an awful lot of kids in dark corners of the cities where the streets are dangerous to go out. I mean, you can't go to the park. You might get killed if you go to the park. So it's
right. And astronauts in the future, they speak of virtual reality to kind of give them something to do to stay sane, confined in a small space. Because we'll talk about space travel sometimes. They're having the serving time in a small confined space approach to space travel still, and so you have to have some virtual reality escape. Some nice green meadow to look at as you're serving out your sentence aboard the Mars craft.
Right. So will they give you a screen to look at, or will they put you to sleep and implant dreams, do you suppose?
Oh, well, if they're able to do that at some point, they will perhaps contemplate doing that.
I think they're pretty close to being able to, zap different parts of your brain and stimulate memories, or perhaps implant false memories. Who knows? It's
direct interface, computer-brain interface. I think Elon Musk already has some designs or prototypes for that.
Yeah, we've been watching some of the Philip K. Dick stories on Amazon Prime, and he was seeing all this, the possibilities of all this stuff long before. But of course, sci-fi writers do generate a lot of the ideas that then actually come to be, because some scientist somewhere says, "Oh, that's an interesting idea. Let's see if we can do it."
Right. Yeah, science fiction is humanity's collective dreaming in a sense, and visualizing the different future scenarios, and sometimes they come true.
Yeah, that's a nice way to put it. Our collective dreaming. What's your take on earlier civilizations? Do you think there's a pre-written history or remembered history, where we came up with technology that might actually have wiped us out at an earlier time?
The Atlantis myth, or in a sense mirrored by the books of Enoch, implied in Genesis about some arrogant civilization that fell, kind of the Atlantis story that's associated with a flood story at the same time. It's certainly a moral lesson for us to not go in that direction, too. They do say that. There's a lot of religions that believe in a past epoch before recorded history. Previous yugas in India were in the Kali Yuga at present, but in previous yugas there were humans in lifespans and great civilizations. And that could either be interpreted as physical, but it could be interpreted as other dimensional. Like in the Book of Enoch, the Garden of Eden is actually on the third plane, I believe it is, the third level, or paradise, the third heaven, and
the
still exists
Paul
now.
To...
The Garden of Eden still exists there in this other dimension.
The Mahabharata tells stories that sound very much like nuclear war, blinding flashes of light, and
that is true.
Animals and people rushing into the river and their skin melting and all, trying to wash the radiation off their bodies before they die.
That is true.
That stuff may have already occurred, and may again if we keep on the path we're going.
Yeah, flying craft are described in some of those Hindu myths, and yes, that is rather curious, that's for sure.
Well, James, we're just about out of time here, but I'm thinking we should go on and do another show, maybe talk about the spiritual, positive things about the earth and our environment, and why we should be trying to put those fires out in the Amazon rather than feeding them, as the farmers light more of them, I guess, every day.
Right, to not check the apocalypse box, but to uncheck the apocalypse box and think about how we may have a better future, create a better future.
Exactly. Well, I think we have to wrap it up for now, though. So thanks, James, for today's show, and we'll do one next week as well.
That sounds wonderful.
In the meantime, I'll be at the upcoming IANDS conference near Philadelphia, Thursday through Sunday of this week, and I hope I'll see some of this audience out there as well. For more of that, please go to IANDS.org. And join us again next Monday, 11 a.m. Eastern, for more NDE Radio. This is Lee Witting saying thanks for listening.